My fiancée said, "I'm canceling the wedding. I'm in love with the wedding planner." I replied, "I understand." Then I told his boss everything. He was fired instantly. When they showed up at my apartment at 3 a.m., when I proposed to Julia, I really thought I'd found my person. We'd been together for 3 years, met through mutual friends, built a life that looked, from the outside, like something out of a lifestyle blog. She worked in PR, confident, sharp, always dressed like she'd stepped out of an ad campaign. I was in software development, quieter, more methodical, the kind of guy who made checklists for vacations and kept digital backups of everything. When we got engaged, she took the reins with the wedding planning. I didn't mind. That was Julia. She thrived on details. She'd spend hours with spreadsheets, Pinterest boards, color palettes. The only time I stepped in was to sign off on the venue, an old restored winery just outside the city. That's where I met him, the wedding planner. His name was Evan, mid-30s, stylish in that calculated way that says, "I own exactly one pair of expensive loafers, but they do all the work." He had an easy charm, the kind that makes people instantly comfortable. Julia adored him. She said he just gets my vision. At first, I didn't see anything wrong. She talked about him a lot, but it was all, "Evan said this color would pop better," or "Evan's contact got us a discount." I brushed it off. Wedding stress makes people obsessive. But then, little things started piling up. She'd spend hours texting, smiling at her phone. Her laptop would snap shut whenever I entered the room. And when I'd ask who it was, she'd shrug, "Just coordinating with Evan." Still, I trusted her. I wanted to trust her. 2 weeks before the wedding, she became distant. Conversations felt mechanical. She stopped saying goodnight, stopped planning anything beyond the big day. Then one evening, I came home early from a client meeting. Julia was on the balcony, phone pressed to her ear. She didn't hear me come in. I froze when I heard her say it. "I can't keep pretending, Evan. I don't want to marry him. I love you." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was rehearsing a PR script. Maybe it was a joke. But her tone, soft, trembling, real, killed any illusion. I went to the living room, sat on the couch, and waited. She came inside half an hour later, startled to see me. "Hey, you're home early," she said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," I replied. "So, Evan, huh?" The blood drained from her face. There was a long silence before she said it. "I'm canceling the wedding. I'm in love with him." I didn't shout. I didn't beg. Something in me just switched off. I remember nodding slowly, hearing my own voice sound eerily calm. "I understand." She looked relieved, like she expected a meltdown and didn't get one. She started explaining. Something about timing, chemistry, how she didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't respond. I just walked into the bedroom, unplugged my laptop, and began copying every document related to our vendors, contracts, and invoices. I had access to all the files. We'd shared everything through Google Drive. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of heartbreak, but because my brain was in overdrive. I wasn't thinking why she did it. I was thinking what to do next. The next morning, I opened the wedding planner's company site. They had a contact corporate link for complaints, contract issues, misconduct. I wrote a detailed, professional email. Attached screenshots of messages I'd seen pop up on Julia's phone. Included their full names, dates, and the fact that they'd been romantically involved while he was still handling our paid event. 2 hours later, I got a call from the company's director. She thanked me for bringing it to their attention. Apparently, Evan had been warned before, boundary issues with clients. She said, "Don't worry, we'll handle it." And they did. By that evening, Evan's profile was gone from the site. Julia found out the next morning. She showed up at my apartment, pale and shaking. "You told them, didn't you?" I looked at her, not angry, not smug, just tired. I told them the truth. She called me a monster, said I'd ruined his life. I told her quietly, "You both did that yourselves." Then she left. I thought that was the end of it. Until, 3 nights later, at 3:04 a.m., someone started pounding on my door. When I looked through the peephole, my stomach dropped. Julia and Evan both looked furious. And that's when the real nightmare began. They stood there under the flickering hallway light. Julia in her oversized coat, hair disheveled, Evan beside her with that smug, self-righteous look people get when they're both furious and terrified. The knocking turned into pounding. I didn't open. Instead, I took my phone, started recording, and spoke clearly toward the door. Julia, Evan, you're on camera. You need to leave. It's 3 a.m. I'm calling the police if you don't. There was a pause. Then Julia's voice, muffled but sharp, cut through the door. You ruined our lives, Alex. You had no right to contact his job. Evan's voice followed, lower, angrier. You're going to regret this. You can't just go around spreading lies about people. That made me laugh, the first real laugh I'd had in days. Lies? You might want to think that through, Evan, I said, especially since your company already confirmed your termination for policy violation. I have the emails and the timestamps. There was another silence. Then something hit the door, not hard, just a frustrated shove. That was enough for me. I called the police. They arrived 12 minutes later, the longest 12 minutes of my life. The officers separated them, took statements in the hallway, then one came to my door. I showed him the footage, the emails, the timestamps. He nodded, said, "You did the right thing," and told them both to leave. As they walked away, Julia turned back. For a split second, her expression wasn't anger, it was embarrassment. She realized what she'd become. When the door finally closed, I sat on the floor for a while. Not crying, not shaking, just empty. There's a particular kind of silence after betrayal. It doesn't hurt, it hums, like a TV left on mute. Over the next week, I started hearing things. Apparently, after Evan's firing, Julia tried to defend him publicly, claimed I'd falsified evidence to ruin them both. The problem for her was that corporate had already investigated. They had his company phone records, text logs, and calendar entries that matched exactly what I'd sent. Within days, their story fell apart. Then came the unexpected part. His fiancée reached out to me. Yeah, Evan had been engaged. She messaged me on LinkedIn, polite, almost eerily calm. I just wanted to thank you. I didn't know what was going on until I saw your email forwarded through internal HR. I wish you hadn't gone through this. But you probably saved me from marrying him. That one message somehow hit harder than anything else. It reminded me that in the wreckage of lies, there are always bystanders who get cut too. Julia texted once after that. I can't believe you destroy everything we had just to get revenge. I didn't reply, because she never understood. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was just done carrying her guilt for my silence. About a month later, I officially canceled the venue. The deposit was gone. She'd spent it already, but honestly, I didn't care. I donated what was left of our joint wedding fund to a local shelter, closed the shared accounts, and wiped the drive where all the wedding files were stored. Closure, I've learned, doesn't always look like peace. Sometimes it's just deleting a shared Google folder without hesitation. By summer, I started rebuilding. Work became therapy, long nights coding with music on, mornings spent running to quiet the noise in my head. I cut contact with mutual friends who tried to stay neutral. There's no neutral ground between honesty and deceit, only distance. Then, one afternoon, I got a letter. Not an email, a letter. Handwritten. From Julia. You ruined me, Alex. I loved you, but you humiliated me. Evan left me too. I hope you're happy. I remember staring at it for a long time before setting it on fire over the kitchen sink. Watching it burn felt strangely ceremonial. Not cruel, not triumphant. Just final. But it didn't end there. A month later, there was a knock at my door again. This time, it wasn't Julia or Evan. It was a lawyer. Apparently, Julia had filed a defamation claim. Said my email to the company had caused her emotional distress and professional embarrassment. When my lawyer read through the notice, he actually smiled. She's bluffing, he said. She doesn't have a case. You provided evidence of misconduct to a legitimate employer. That's not defamation. That's whistleblowing. We filed a counterclaim for harassment. She dropped everything a week later. It was the last I ever heard of her. Months passed. The quiet in my apartment stopped feeling heavy. The mornings got lighter. I started volunteering at a community tech center, teaching coding to kids. I wasn't trying to heal anymore. I was just living. Then, out of nowhere, one of my students' parents recognized me. Turns out, she worked at the same PR agency where Julia used to. Apparently, word spread fast after her affair went public. She tried to get a new job out of state, but her reputation followed her. It should have made me feel vindicated, but it didn't. It just felt sad. You spend so much time trying to get closure, then realize some stories don't end. They just lose relevance. By the time fall came, I deleted her number, changed my locks, and finally took down the engagement photo from my wall. But one night, I found myself looking at the burned spot on my counter where her letter had turned to ash. And I realized that's where the real ceremony had happened. Not in the venue she designed, not at the altar she decorated, but right there, in the quiet truth of a man who finally stopped pretending to understand a woman who never cared to explain herself. Update 1. It's been about 6 months since everything went down. The canceled wedding, the police, the lawsuit that fizzled before it even began. I thought that chapter was closed. Then life, in its strange, ironic way, decided to remind me that closure isn't always quiet. It started with a phone call from my buddy Mark. He works in real estate and occasionally sends me listings, mostly to nudge me into finally buying a place. This time, though, his tone was off. Hey, weird question, man. Did you know Julia's back in town? My stomach tightened. What do you mean back? I just showed an apartment this morning, to her. She didn't see me at first. She was using her maiden name. Looked completely different, though. Thinner. Nervous. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I just sighed. Yeah, figures. Apparently, after the fallout with Evan and the failed lawsuit, she'd gone off the radar for months. No social media, no mutual friends posting updates. And now, she was quietly trying to restart her life in the same city where everything blew up. For a week, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I missed her, I didn't, but because some small, stupid part of me wanted to understand why she'd come back here. The place that saw her worst moments. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I saw her. I was walking downtown with Claire, someone I'd met at a photography class a few months prior. It's casual, easy. The kind of connection that doesn't demand you fix yourself before you're ready. We were getting coffee when Julia walked past the cafe window. At first, I wasn't even sure it was her. She looked deflated. No makeup. Hair darker, shorter. She glanced through the glass, froze, and for a split second, our eyes met. She hesitated, then walked in. My pulse quickened, but I stayed seated. Claire, sensing the tension, quietly stepped aside to give me space. Julia stopped a few feet away. Hi, Alex. I nodded. Hi. She looked around awkwardly. You look good. Thanks, I said. You too. That was a lie. There was a long pause before she finally said it. The thing I think she came there to say. I'm sorry. For all of it. I waited. I know saying that doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know, I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was just scared. I felt trapped. And Evan made me feel seen. It was almost painful, not because it hurt anymore, but because of how small it all sounded now. The drama, the betrayal, the destruction of something we'd built, all reduced to 2 words. I was scared. I told her quietly, I don't hate you. I just don't see you the same way anymore. She nodded. Her eyes welled up. I know. You shouldn't. Before she left, she said something that stuck with me. You were always calm, even when I broke everything. That's what scared me the most. You never tried to make me stay. And that's when I realized control was always her drug. When she couldn't control the narrative, she lost herself. She left the cafe without looking back. I watched her disappear into the crowd, a faint, tired shadow of someone who used to command every room she entered. Claire came back to the table and didn't ask a single question. She just reached over, squeezed my hand, and said, You okay? I was, for the first time, really okay. A few days later, I got another email, this time from Evan's former company. They were conducting an internal audit for client protection and asked if I'd be willing to provide testimony for an ethics report on inappropriate client relationships. I sent them everything, not out of revenge, but because stories like mine usually get buried, and maybe, this time, someone else would be warned before it's too late. And here's the funny thing, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. Like a book you finally put down, not because it's over, but because you've outgrown the story. Final update. It's been just over a year since Julia walked into that cafe. A year since I looked her in the eyes and finally realized there was nothing left to fix, only things to leave behind. If you told me back then that I'd be in this place now, I'd have laughed in disbelief. Not because I didn't think healing was possible, but because I didn't think peace was. I thought people like me, the quiet, rational ones who try to solve everything with logic, never really get over betrayal. We just carry it in silence. But turns out, silence can be sacred too. I moved out of my old apartment a few months ago. Sold it. Actually. The same one where she'd stood crying at 3 a.m., demanding that I undo the truth. Every corner of that place had memories, and while I'd stopped being haunted by them, I didn't want to live inside ghosts. My new place is smaller, brighter. One bedroom, a balcony that overlooks the river. I set up a desk by the window where I work mornings with coffee and music playing low. It's quiet, but it's mine. Claire and I are still together. What we have isn't loud or cinematic. It's steady. We talk about everything, even the uncomfortable stuff. She knows all about Julia, the emails, the police, even the lawsuit. One night, I asked her if it ever bothered her knowing I'd once been engaged to someone like that. She just smiled and said, "No, because you didn't let her turn you into her." That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Because if I'm being honest, there were moments I could have gone down that road. Moments where bitterness felt easier than balance, where proving a point felt more tempting than moving on. But in the end, restraint is the only real revenge that doesn't rot you from the inside. A few weeks ago, I ran into Julia again, purely by accident. I was at a tech conference, walking through the lobby between panels, and she was there, working at a small PR booth for some mid-tier agency. She saw me. We both froze. Then she smiled. A small, tired smile. "Hey, Alex." "Hey." No drama. No tension. Just two people who once mistook chaos for connection. She asked how I was. I told her honestly, good. Really good. She nodded and said, "I'm glad." And for the first time, I believed she meant it. We didn't talk long, just polite small talk before she got called away. As I watched her go, I realized something important. I didn't feel anything. Not anger. Not sadness. Not even relief. Just neutrality. And that's when I understood what closure really is. Closure isn't confrontation. It's not getting an apology or watching someone fall apart. It's waking up one day and realizing their name doesn't pull at anything inside you anymore. That night, back home, I found the old flash drive where I'd stored all the evidence, the screenshots, the emails, everything from that nightmare year. I plugged it in, checked it once, and deleted it all. No drama, no ritual, just a click and silence. Because the truth had already done its job. The rest was just weight I didn't need to carry anymore. Now, when people talk about moving on, I think about that phrase differently. It's not walking away, it's walking through. Through the guilt, through the anger, through the parts of yourself that still flinch at certain memories. Julia was never my forever. She was the lesson before it. And I don't regret learning it, even if it came with scars. The other night, Claire and I were sitting on the balcony, wine glasses in hand, the city lights reflecting off the river. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said softly, "You ever think about her?" I paused for a moment before answering, only as a reminder of who I'll never be again. She smiled and squeezed my hand. And that's when I knew this was it. Not revenge, not redemption, just peace. The kind that doesn't need witnesses.